What's going on, everybody? All right, so in this episode, going to sidestep a little bit away from all the marketing stuff and then really dig into some story knowledge. I just got off of a coaching call, helping somebody try to pull together their documentary story. Not sure if you knew that. I do coaching. I look at stories for people, help them get a bearing on their story, make sure they're finding the heart of their story, that they're structuring a good story, making it engaging. That's what I want to talk to you about today because I was really inspired by that call. What I want to explain is the importance of the controlling idea and finding your theme. Back in December, we released an episode about the 8 fundamental elements of a story, and I mentioned the importance of theme, the importance of a controlling idea. This episode, we're going to unpack that more and really just start to dive into why they're important. We also just released an episode recently talking about the attention span myth. I think that was episode 21 or 22, talking about the attention span myth, and just it was basically just a rant of me just being real irritated about everybody complaining about the attention span myth, kind of just went after people hard. Just basically, it's make more interesting stuff. Let's try that. This episode, if that one left you kind of with the setup, but really no payoff of but you didn't tell us how to beat it. That's what we're talking about here. I'm going to talk to you about how to beat that attention span myth. And the key to beating the attention span myth, to moving your story or your message, rather, from boring to interesting to engaging, is finding your theme, finding your controlling idea, and finding your theme. Key terms, let's define some key terms. Okay, what is your controlling idea? What is your theme? Very often I use these two terms interchangeably, but they're not actually the same thing. It's kind of like calling a square a rectangle, but every rectangle isn't a square, right? So every controlling idea has a theme inside of it, but the theme isn't the controlling idea, if that makes sense. It'll make sense as I define it. All right, so what is your controlling idea? Your controlling idea are the thoughts and beliefs that the storyteller has about the topic within the story that you're trying to communicate to your audience. Essentially, as we're going through this description, it's really easy to just shift your mind and not think about this ephemeral, emotional journey, story, magical fantasy thing, right? If you think about a story as an argument, okay, that you're trying to communicate to the audience. You're trying to sell the audience on an idea, and you're using the vehicle of a story in order to do that, all right? And so you're putting your argument inside of a story. When you think of a story in that way, the controlling idea is your hypothesis. It's what you're setting out to prove through your story, okay? That's what the controlling idea is. Now, your theme is essentially the emotional core of your controlling idea, all right? Only because this is off the top of my head, I'm just going to use what I was explaining, what I was working with this guy with his story. I won't give too many details about the story, but the story is about him doing a story about a mission organization, and they help women get free from sex trafficking, right? So they help free women from that. His controlling idea that we kind of were able to then pin down after talking back and forth is that he essentially he doesn't want to shy away from the fact that they want to show how dark this is, because they want to show the reality of this, but they also want to show how God is present throughout it, and that even physical liberation from that situation doesn't provide the full restoration, healing, and freedom, that only comes through the power of the Holy Spirit. So that's his controlling idea, okay? Now, from that controlling idea, beneath that is the primal emotional core, all right? It's this human primal core that is actually, you can hear it within that controlling idea. And that's our theme. And our theme of this story is essentially the movement from slavery to freedom, both physical slavery as well as spiritual slavery. We're moving from slavery from freedom. It's this movement from darkness to light. All right, you've got your topic being sex trafficking, this organization, because we're making a story to communicate who this organization is. That's what you're doing. You're trying to communicate your message, right? Your company, your brand, right? Like give the audience a sense of what you're about. So that's your information, your message that you want to communicate, which on the surface, I mean, it is kind of interesting because because the topic-wise, what we're focused on, it's just kind of interesting. But on the surface, that's just information, okay? What we're doing then is we're pulling that information into an argument, and we're presenting that argument based off of a hypothesis, and the hypothesis being that controlling idea, which I summarized for you. I won't be able to say that out loud again. I feel like I did a good job. Just rewind. But we're communicating that controlling idea, right? So now we've taken something that was boring on the basis, and now we've made it interesting because now we're communicating that through an argument. The way that you move from interesting to engaging is when you actually get at the emotional core of that controlling idea, which is the theme, and then you focus in on that theme. And that is how you truly engage people. What do I mean by this? Truly engage people. You can see that there's almost like a depth that we're going through as we're trying to identify what this story is actually about. Really, what we're trying to map out with this is the spine of the story. Once you find your controlling idea, you've found your north, right? You've found your due north. That will help you to create the spine of your story, to create the outline of your story, because now you know what argument you're having. You understand what you're setting out to prove. And if you understand what you're setting out to prove, you know how to logically build that proof, right? Like in order to communicate, okay, freedom from sex trafficking, transformation through the Holy Spirit, like there's going to have to be some topics that we lead the audience through so they can even comprehend what the heck that means, right? So for anybody who's listening to this, not faith-based, like you have no clue what the heck I just said, right? You're going to need some explanation. So that way, that makes sense. It's not some Christianese phrase. Like it actually would just make sense. That's what your story is then setting out to do. You're thinking about it in terms of formulating that argument. Now you're actually crafting this in an interesting way. You're building your story as an argument. You're leading the audience from one aha moment to the next. All right? It should be this, a story is in essence a sort of like an unraveling mystery, right? Like you're really wanting to get the audience curious, and it's kind of like you feed them breadcrumbs as they move along the journey. Like they get to learn more, but that learning opens up new questions. Then you answer another question, which opens up a new question. You answer another one, which opens up a new question. This is why when you're watching a television show, you will end up just binging that show over an entire weekend. It's because the story keeps you curious. It keeps you interested because it's pulling you emotionally. You're getting emotionally invested in it, but you're constantly curious about what's going to happen. There's these twists and turns. As it answers one question, and it opens another one. Answers one question, opens another one. That's what a cliffhanger is. A cliffhanger is the asking of a question at the end of an episode. You have to go to the next episode to find the answer to the questions they just asked, okay? Or the question that they just incepted into your mind. Maybe the show isn't literally asking a question at times. There might be some sort of plot event that happened that makes you ask, why did that happen? Or it makes you ask, what's going to happen next? This is how a story moves you through, and this is the argument. It's like thesis, antithesis, antithesis, thesis, antithesis, thesis, antithesis. It's just moving you back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. That's the interesting And now you've made learning fun, okay? It makes this whole journey of watching this story interesting. This is why stories are far superior in holding and capturing interest than just trying to push a positive marketing message at people and just listing a bunch of information, thinking that people are making a unemotional decision rationally, which we're not, by the way. But that's why that stuff's boring. Yes, it requires a little bit of effort to structure this stuff so that way you can make learning fun for people, that you can make it an enjoyable experience. So that's how we move from boring, which is just information and just some canned corporate message, right? That sounds appropriate, but it's really dumb and we filter it out, to something that's now interesting because now we've got an actual argument that we're following. When we move it down to engaging is when we get at the emotional core of that message. Why this is necessary to focus on theme, right, is because it gets at the primal unifying core of humanity, all right? For example, the movie Moneyball is one of my favorite movies. However, the sport of baseball is one of my least favorite sports. Not sure if you understand the movie Moneyball. It's about baseball. Okay, Brad Pitt and Jonah Hill are in it. It's really awesome. You should totally check it out if you don't know what I'm talking about. It's going to make the rest of this explanation difficult for you. So just go watch the movie. It's awesome. But that movie is, the topic is baseball. You have a failing baseball team and they've got to turn the team around. That's the topic, right? Is we're looking at baseball. And not only are we looking at baseball, we're looking at like statistics. So you've got the two most boring things in my life, statistics and baseball. You literally can't numb my brain more trying to talk to me about statistics and baseball, okay? But why is this my favorite film, right? It's because the emotional core, right? Like the emotional core is about like redemption, you know? It's about fighting a system and creating a new way of solving a problem, you know? Like that's really what we're getting out. It's kind of like a revolution story in a sense, you know? Like its internal core and its internal arc is kind of like an overcoming the monster arc, right? Like it gets at this primal unifying thing that is human. And because it focuses on what is human and what is primal, the story transcends being about baseball. It transcends it. It becomes about a personal journey. Now it's something that I can relate to, a person who hates baseball and statistics. And it's now immediately on my top 10 films. You have to understand this, okay? Because this is the key to overcoming the short attention span myth, right? And it's the key to making what is appearingly boring stuff very interesting. You have to look at, and in a way, it's difficult to do because what we're challenged with is upending our message and our information as least important and prioritizing the human journey and the human story and the primal connection amongst all of us. Because what you have to understand is when you can get at the core of humanity, now you've made something that's interesting to people out beyond your core target audience, right? Because now you've created a human story. However, it's highly interesting to the core target audience because the topic is already interesting to them. But you've created something that can transcend, that can move outward and expand its reach that way. No one's going to be embarrassed by sharing that story with their friend because, oh my God, it's an awesome story, right? That's what really identifying your core theme helps you to do, is it helps you to transcend just the topic. And now you're really focused on like a sort of primal need, okay? And because the majority of our decisions that we make are emotionally driven, the more simple you can make that emotion, which is to say the more primal you can get at your emotional core, right? The more leverage your argument has, because it's not about what you're setting out to prove anymore. It's about that emotion. Okay, so when we're talking about theme, when I'm talking about a deep emotional core, that primal emotional core, what am I talking about? How do we know when we've gone like primal enough? These are like your basic, like timeless themes, timeless story themes. So it's like light versus dark, right? Life and death, security and vulnerability, okay? Slavery and freedom, right? Defeat and victory. I said safety, right? It's these things. You just have to think about like these primal human needs. What are our primal human needs? Food, water, shelter, community, right? Like love, life, freedom, property, happiness, like these primal human needs that make us a whole person. These things that when we don't have them, we go into immediate crisis mode. That is primal. That's what I mean. Because when you can focus on that, that translates beyond your industry. That translates beyond your company. That translates beyond your target audience. And I know a lot of this information is almost like antithetical to what we often preach within marketing circles, is you need a specific message for a specific person. So I'm not ignoring any of that. Yes, you need a specific message for a specific person. You also need to guarantee that that person is going to hang with the message, right? And so it's almost like you're getting so specific that you transcend specificity. I know that's weird, but you get so specific that you just get to the core of human beings, right? You just get to the core of our humanity, and that connects. Obviously, that's going to connect at a deeper level with the person you're talking to, but now it also makes it transient. So to where like that person has no problem sharing it with their friend, because who's probably not even in their industry, because it was such a great story. And it like adds that flair of organic shareability to your content now that wasn't there before. Okay. Why is there a positive and negative to these themes, and why do we want to frame them as both a positive and a negative? Well, remember that your story is a journey, that you are it's a progression over time. And the reason they're binary is because you're leading your audience from one emotional pull, from one emotional instance of your theme at one point of the story to another emotional instance at the second point of the story. So at the beginning of the story, and this is all part of proving that argument, okay? So as you're building towards your reveal, towards your conclusion, right? Which is the essentially, let's just say, like, if you, for this story that I was helping this guy figure out, the ultimate reveal and the ultimate conclusion is positive, right? Like we're looking at light, right? We're looking at freedom. So that's where we're heading to. And so if we're heading there, then we want to start the story at the opposite, which is slavery. And so if you keep in mind my whole concept of emotional deltas, right? Like that's the reason why, that's essentially we're using theme to create a transcendent emotional delta, if you will, where you get a sense to feel the pit of what the opposite of our meaning, the opposite of our ultimate theme is. But then by the end of the story, you are now experiencing the actual part of the theme that we want to say. The reason why I'm being weird about using words here is because you could be telling a tragic story, right? And so therefore your end theme might be the negative part of the emotional value instead of the positive part of the emotional value. For the most part, we're doing brand storytelling. We're telling positive stories. So it's unlikely that you're going to end in the negative emotional value point. You're going to end in positive. Okay. So as you're communicating this theme, you're starting negative, you're starting at its polar negative, and then you're leading that audience into its polar opposite, its positive expression of the theme. That's really what's going to give that audience that inspiration. It's what's going to give that audience that like, oh, this is awesome, because now they're experiencing your theme emotionally in its fullness, in its full positive form. It's really important to find your theme, to find the heart of your story, because that gives you your heading, that gives you your north, right? Without your theme, without your controlling idea, you're kind of just meandering around. You don't really have like a focus. And if you're too much on the artistic aspect, then you don't know what should be in the story, what shouldn't be in the story, because now everything's precious to you, right? So you don't know what you need to cut out and you don't know what you need to leave in, okay? If you're too much on the marketing aspect, it's the same thing. You don't know what messages are relevant or irrelevant based on this story, within the context of this story, because every message is precious to you. All the information is important. Therefore, we need to give all the information to people. No, you don't want to wear down your audience with either too much information and bore them, or wear them down with too many meandering artistic flares that also will bore them because they're not related to the story. The theme and the controlling idea basically helps you to focus your message, kind of like you're making a missile. Like it helps you to focus your message, to trim off all of the fat off of it so that you just have the meat that matters. And what you're left with then is a story where everything within that story serves to reinforce that theme and reinforce that controlling idea, which is why you want to focus your story on a single idea, on a single controlling idea, because yes, they're going on this learning path. Yes, they're going on this journey, but every scene they're experiencing, every scene they're watching, every scene they're experiencing, every line they're reading serves to reinforce the controlling idea. You're basically making like a highly powerful message that's also using repetition, right, to really be internalized within the audience. And they're watching and they're staying to watch because they're now engaged in a story. They're emotionally engaged because of the depth, the primal depth of your theme, that your story core has transcended just your topic. It's now a human story, right? So they're really engaged with that because of the primal anchor. They're highly interested because you've structured it as an argument. And you're using question, answer to make learning fun for them. And because now you're telling the story about your topic, that's the top information that's getting internalized. So your message gets internalized when you focus on this, on telling stories this way. Okay? So it's in essence, that's how you overcome the attention span myth. You identify your story's core. You identify a proof that you're setting out to prove to somebody. And when you find that primal core, you find that thing that transcends the story, becomes a human story. That's something that someone wants to watch, right? Because now you've made it interesting, because other people and their struggles and overcoming their struggles is interesting to us. It connects us. We're connected through struggle, right? We're connected through pain. All right. Hope this was helpful. As always, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Storytelligent. Always down to talking about story. You can also send me a message directly from the website at McNabbStorytelling.com. If you're enjoying the podcast, would love to receive a rating and review. And like I mentioned at the beginning, I offer story coaching as a service. So if you're struggling with your personal story, be it you're making a brand film, you just don't know how to get through, you're trying to put together a documentary, and you're just tired of fighting through the weeds or trying to feel your way out of the edit cave, you want to get some clarity and some perspective on that, I'm here to help. Just reach out to me. Go to the website, McNabbStorytelling.com. Reach out to me there. I will see you guys in the next one. Take care.